surface is a different rhythm, a pulse of ambition, greed, and danger. In this city, the line between survival and extinction is razor thin. At 738 North State Street, Dean O'Banion tends to his florist shop, the Green Mill's quieter cousin, arranging lilies, roses, and carnations with precise hands. The scent of blossoms mingles with the faint, acrid tang of gunpowder that lingers from a skirmish in the alley behind. He moves silently, almost meditatively, but every gesture carries weight. O'Banion is more than a florist. He is a strategist, a tactician, a man who has learned that beauty and brutality are not mutually exclusive. He picks up a ledger and flips through the entries. Shipments of Canadian whiskey, deliveries of stolen beer, payments from speakeasy owners desperate to keep their doors open. Each number represents profit, influence, and potential danger. Outside, the city murmurs, streetcars clang, children shout, and somewhere a rival gang plots. Inside, O'Banion calculates his next move. By the early 1920s, O'Banion has built the Northside Gang into a formidable force. The gang is primarily Irish-American, composed of pickpockets, labor sluggers, and bootleggers who have learned the value of loyalty and the cost of betrayal. They operate with military precision, using automobiles for rapid escapes, warehouses as secret hubs, and a network of informants embedded in bars, factories, and police precincts. Each member knows their role. Each action is measured. Together, they control large swaths of Chicago's North Side, from the edges of Lincoln Park to the bustling business corridors of Clark Street. But power breeds enemies. Across town, the Italian-American Chicago outfit, led by Johnny Torrio and soon after by his protege Al Capone, watches with calculating eyes. Torrio is methodical, strategic, and cautious. Capone is different, charismatic, ruthless, and fearless. He sees the North Side as a barrier to his ambitions, a patch of territory he intends to dominate. The stage is set for a collision that will engulf the city in violence. The tension between the gangs is palpable in the everyday life of Chicago. A bartender is intimidated for revealing a shipment route. A warehouse explodes after a rival tampers with the cargo. Rumors of attacks spread faster than the winter wind. The city becomes a chessboard, with each gang plotting moves, counter-moves, and traps. O'Banion's eyes are everywhere. On allies, on rivals, on law enforcement, and even on civilians whose loyalty can shift with the promise of protection or payment. O'Banion himself is a study in contrasts. Gentle with customers in his shop, meticulous with flowers, he can be merciless when provoked. The first rule of surviving in this city, he once told Jaime Weiss, his closest lieutenant, is knowing who wants you dead and why. His intuition is precise, his instincts are sharp, yet even he cannot predict everything. Chicago is a city that punishes miscalculations with brutal efficiency. Jaime Weiss, O'Banion's right-hand man, brings a different energy to the gang. Fierce, relentless, and often unpredictable, he thrives in the chaos that O'Banion carefully manages. Weiss organizes operations with military rigor, coordinating shipments, planning raids, and overseeing enforcers. Under their combined leadership, the Northside Gang innovates, modifying rifles for faster reloads, hiding caches of whiskey in abandoned warehouses, and employing vehicles to outrun the outfit's patrols. Despite their power, the Northside Gang is constantly tested. Small-scale shootouts erupt in back alleys, taverns, and warehouses. Rival gangs set ambushes. Informants leak secrets. Each confrontation is a lesson, a reminder that in Chicago, survival depends on vigilance, cunning, and ruthlessness. The gang is feared, respected, and hated in equal measure, and O'Banion knows the line between respect and resentment can shift overnight. By 1924, the city's criminal landscape begins to crystallize. Torrio, sensing the opportunity to expand, begins consolidating the Italian gangs into what will become the Chicago outfit. Capone, ambitious and charismatic, takes the reins in 1925, bringing energy, violence, and an unyielding desire for dominance. He views the North Side not merely as a rival, but as an obstacle to a personal empire. The rivalry escalates from economic competition to existential threat. O'Banion, meanwhile, continues to maneuver. He maintains political connections, bribes key police officers, and cultivates alliances with smaller gangs. Every move is calculated, Yet even as he strengthens his position, the pressure builds. Each shipment intercepted, each ally turned, each casual insult becomes part of a larger chain reaction. Chicago is a city on edge, its streets a powder keg waiting for a spark. The North Side Gang's success is measured not only in profits, but in survival. Members learn to read the subtle signs of danger, the glint of a weapon, the tone of a voice, the appearance of a stranger in a familiar place. They adapt quickly, creating contingency plans for ambushes and arrests and often executing them with precision. But the human cost is ever present. Lives are lost, families are threatened, and loyalty is tested daily. Even with their advantages, O'Banion and Weiss know that the Chicago outfit is relentless. The outfit is growing stronger, more organized, and increasingly willing to use extreme violence to achieve its goals. And in a city where reputation is everything, hesitation can be fatal. Each small confrontation, each minor victory or defeat, sets the stage for the events that will define Chicago's criminal underworld for decades. By the end of the decade, the North Side Gang is firmly entrenched. They are innovators, tacticians, and survivors, yet the specter of Al Capone looms large. Their fate, intertwined with the ambitions and brutality of their rivals, is moving toward a turning point that will erupt into one of the most infamous massacres in American criminal history. The streets of Chicago hum with anticipation, tension, and a quiet dread. The city itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable collision. In the quiet moments of his florist shop, Dean O'Banion arranges lilies, unaware that his life, and the life of his gang, will soon be upended. In Chicago, beauty and violence coexist, sometimes in the same room. And the North Side Gang is about to learn that no empire, no matter how cleverly built, is immune to the ambitions of those who covet it. By the mid-1920s, Chicago's streets are no longer just thoroughfares, they are battlegrounds. The city is alive with the hum of illicit commerce, the clatter of streetcars, the hiss of cars skimming past alleyways, and the muted murmurs of men moving contraband through shadows. Bootlegging is no longer a side business, it is survival, power, and war. Dean O'Banion's North Side Gang has grown in strength and organization, yet rivalries simmer and threaten to boil over. Across town, Johnny Torrio has retired, leaving Al Capone in command of the Chicago outfit. Capone is young, charismatic, and ruthless. He views the North Side not just as competition, but as a barrier to complete domination of Chicago's liquor trade. Capone's men are numerous, well-armed, and increasingly bold. The conflict becomes known, retrospectively, as the Beer Wars. Every shipment of alcohol, every speakeasy under surveillance, becomes a potential flashpoint. O'Banion, aware of the stakes, fortifies his operations. He uses back alleys, warehouses, and legitimate businesses as fronts. He coordinates with loyal police officers who look the other way, for a price. But even meticulous planning cannot prevent every confrontation. Skirmishes erupt throughout the city. In early 1924, a shipment of whiskey is intercepted near Wrigleyville, triggering a gunfight in which a minor North Side enforcer is killed. In another incident, a warehouse burns mysteriously after rival tampering with explosives. Each event escalates tensions, leaving a trail of fear and retribution. Small victories are celebrated, but losses are remembered with cold calculation. O'Banion understands that every action has consequences. You take a man's life, he tells Weiss. You inherit the war that comes after. His strategic mind is constantly calculating probabilities, which route to use for shipments, which men to trust, which streets to avoid. The North Side Gang becomes a machine, precise in its operations yet human in its vulnerabilities. Then, in November 1924, the unthinkable happens. O'Banion himself is gunned down in his flower shop. Two men enter under the guise of paying for flowers. Shots are fired. The florist shop becomes a crime scene, blood soaking the petals of lilies and roses. O'Banion is dead. The North Side Gang loses not only a leader but a symbol. His death sends shockwaves through the city, destabilizing alliances and emboldening rivals. Leadership passes to George "Bugs" Moran, a man with a reputation for daring and cunning. Moran is intelligent but impulsive. Unlike O'Banion, he lacks the same charm with politicians and law enforcement. He relies on intimidation, force, and careful planning of high-stakes moves. Under his command, The North Side Gang becomes increasingly aggressive, striking at Capone's operations whenever possible. Retaliatory attacks multiply. Moran orchestrates raids on rival warehouses, ambushes Italian shipments, and enforces his authority with violence. Streets echo with gunfire as men jockey for dominance. The city becomes a theater of terror, where civilians, innocent bystanders, often pay the price of the gang's ambitions. Every action, every gunshot, escalates the conflict. Capone, never one to be outmaneuvered, responds in kind. He employs strategy and terror. Ambushes are planned with military precision. Men disguised as police or deliverymen execute hits on Moran's men. Vehicles are modified to carry more men and more weapons, allowing for rapid strikes across the city. Capone's reach extends, and the North Side Gang feels the pressure mounting. The human cost of this escalating war is staggering. Men are killed in alleys, shot in front of saloons, or left to die in abandoned buildings. Families live in fear. Neighbors watch suspiciously, unsure who to trust. The North Side Gang, once a tightly organized unit, begins to feel the strain. Loyalty is tested, morale fluctuates, and paranoia sets in. Moran knows that one mistake could spell disaster. Throughout 1925 and 1926, the back and forth of the beer wars intensifies. Each gang innovates new tactics, hidden weapons, false information, decoy shipments. The streets are littered with the detritus of conflict: bullet casings, burned-out cars, shattered windows. The city itself seems to react to the violence, the air thick with smoke, the sidewalks slick with rain and blood. Moran begins to realize that Capone will not simply be negotiated with. The stakes are no longer about money. They are about survival, reputation, and dominance. The North Side Gang must either strike decisively or be destroyed. Strategic decisions become personal, and every action is shadowed by the inevitability of confrontation. Then, the fateful winter of 1928-1929 approaches. Planning begins for a confrontation that will shock the city and the nation. Moran's men are on edge. Capone's men, eager to cement supremacy, prepare meticulously. Both sides weigh weapons, tactics, timing, and intelligence. The stage is set for an event that will mark the apex of Chicago's Prohibition-era gang violence. Yet even in the midst of this chaos, moments of human complexity emerge. Moran negotiates with local business owners for safe passage of shipments. Capone shows generosity to loyal associates. O'Banion's legacy lingers in the way the North Side Gang respects discipline and cunning, even as they escalate the war. The streets, violent and unpredictable, are also a canvas for ambition, loyalty, and human frailty. The beer wars illustrate the duality of strategy and cost. Every tactical victory carries psychological weight. Every assassination attempt teaches lessons about trust, planning, and the fragility of life. As the North Side Gang and Capone's outfit push each other toward extremes, the city watches, often helpless, as the human stakes rise and the inevitability of a climactic confrontation grows. By late 1928, the North Side Gang is battle-hardened but exhausted. Moran's leadership has strengthened some factions but strained others. Capone is calculating, ruthless, and increasingly bold. The lines have been drawn, the rules rewritten, and Chicago is now a city of war. The world has yet to see what form this war will take, but the coming storm promises blood, strategy, and historical infamy. In these months, every shipment, every conversation, every glance in the darkened streets becomes a harbinger of what is to come. The North Side Gang, emboldened but wary, prepares for the decisive moment that will define their legacy and reshape Chicago's underworld. The stage is set for the event that will forever embed the North Side blood feud into history. February 14th, 1929. Chicago is cold and gray, the kind of winter morning that seeps into bones and chills the soul. The streets of the North Side are quiet, deceptively calm. Shops are shuttered, streetcars clatter along frozen rails, and the occasional figure hurries through snow-dusted alleys, unaware of the storm about to descend. At 2122 North Clark Street, an abandoned brick garage stands innocuous, its windows frosted over, doors slightly ajar. Inside, 7 men of the North Side Gang gather. They joke, they plan, they sip whiskey, unaware that their lives are about to be extinguished in minutes. George "Bugs" Moran, the gang's leader, is conspicuously absent that morning. He has been cautious, sensing the rising threat from Capone's men, and has taken an alternate route to avoid potential ambush. His absence is perhaps the only thing that will save him. Inside the garage, Moran's lieutenants, familiar faces hardened by years of violence, stand by their weapons, confident in the relative safety of their headquarters. They do not yet know that the law they trust, the uniform they respect, will soon become a mask for death. At exactly 10:30 a.m., a vehicle rolls up. Out step 4 men, dressed as uniformed Chicago police officers. They carry Thompson's submachine guns, their barrels gleaming, gloves pulled tight. In the cold light of winter, they appear official, authoritative, unthreatening. The men inside the garage glance at the uniforms, hesitant, then relax. After all, who would suspect the police? Moments later, shots ring out. The rhythmic roar of submachine guns and the sharp cracks of shotguns fill the air, echoing off brick walls and empty streets. Men are lined against the wall, rifles at their sides, eyes wide with disbelief. In seconds, the North Side gang is cut down. The attackers move with chilling efficiency, emptying clip after clip. Blood splatters across walls, coats, and the wooden floor, a violent tableau frozen in time. 7 bodies lie on the garage floor within minutes, some slumped over, some sprawled with hands frozen in futile defense. The scene is brutal, methodical, and horrifying. Moran himself narrowly escapes, having taken a different route, a twist of fate that spares his life, leaving him to witness the devastation from a distance. Outside, the cold Chicago air is punctuated by the muffled sounds of gunfire fading into silence, leaving only the aftermath. Blood, destruction, and the chilling knowledge that the North Side gang has been struck at its heart. The St. Valentine's Day massacre is more than a simple attack. It is a strategic, psychological statement by Capone and the Chicago outfit. The North Side gang's power is challenged, their numbers decimated, and the streets of Chicago reshaped. The use of police uniforms is deliberate, exploiting the trust citizens and gang members place in law enforcement, blurring the line between legality and criminality. News spreads quickly. Chicago newspapers print gruesome images. The nation reacts with shock and horror. Headlines scream of unprecedented violence. The public is stunned. 7 men executed in cold blood in broad daylight. The massacre becomes the defining moment of the beer wars, a culmination of years of escalating tension, rivalry, and ambition. The psychological toll is immense. Survivors of the North Side gang are traumatized. Moran, though alive, is forced to recalibrate his strategies. Fear and paranoia grip the city, making every shadow, every uniform, and every stranger a potential threat. Law enforcement faces intense scrutiny, criticized for its inability to prevent the carnage. Meanwhile, Capone's empire expands, his influence cemented, his audacity celebrated among his men. The massacre also demonstrates the brutal calculus of organized crime. Power is maintained not just through economic control, but through terror, precision, and timing. Every shot fired is a message, every victim a symbol. The North Side gang, once a dominant force, is now fractured. Their human cost is irreparable. Families mourn, neighborhoods whisper in fear, and the underworld adapts to this new balance of power. Strategically, Capone's attack succeeds. The North Side gang is weakened beyond repair, its cohesion shattered, its influence diminished. Moran struggles to rally remnants, but the psychological and operational damage is profound. The streets of Chicago, once a competitive battleground, now tilt heavily in Capone's favor. The massacre is a turning point, a lesson in the lethal combination of planning, deception, and raw firepower. Yet the massacre is not without its consequences. Public outrage forces authorities to respond, increasing pressure on all criminal organizations. Capone, though untouchable in many ways, now draws more law enforcement attention, setting the stage for future confrontations. The event, while successful in its immediate goal, casts a long shadow, embedding both gangs into Chicago's history and national consciousness. The St. Valentine's Day massacre is remembered not merely as an act of violence, but as a convergence of strategy, psychology, and fate. The precision of the attack, the use of disguise, the timing, and the choice of targets all reflect a calculated understanding of both human and tactical vulnerabilities. It marks the zenith of the beer wars, the moment when ambition, rivalry, and ruthlessness collide in a tableau of death that no one in Chicago would forget. As winter fades and the city slowly moves on, the massacre leaves an indelible mark. Moran rebuilds in fragments, cautious and haunted. Capone's rise continues, his reputation cemented as a man willing to employ any means necessary to dominate the streets. The Northside Gang, once a force defined by ambition, strategy, and loyalty, is forever altered. Its story is a testament to the brutal realities of organized crime. Survival demands cunning, betrayal is inevitable, and power comes with a human cost that cannot be measured in dollars alone. The day of February 14, 1929, becomes a symbol of the Northside blood feud, a stark reminder of the violent, ruthless, and high-stakes world of Prohibition-era Chicago. In its aftermath, the city itself seems to hold its breath, the echoes of gunfire lingering, the lessons etched into the walls, and the lives lost a permanent scar on the urban landscape. The morning after February 14, 1929, Chicago awakens to a city forever changed. The North Side, once bustling with commerce and everyday life, is heavy with unease. Newspapers scream of the St. Valentine's Day massacre, 7 men executed in a cold, calculated strike. Photographs of the victims, sprawled across the floor of the Clark Street garage, shock the nation. Families mourn in silence, neighbors whisper warnings, eyes darting at every passerby. Chicago itself seems to hold its breath, the echo of gunfire lingering like smoke in the cold winter air. George "Bugs" Moran, the Northside Gang's leader, survives. But survival is no comfort. Moran watches from a distance as his empire fractures. Loyalty, once the gang's foundation, is tested. Some men desert in fear, others are paralyzed by grief, unable to act decisively. The Northside Gang, which had once dominated the northern districts of the city with strategy and precision, now struggles with confusion, paranoia, and a leadership shaken to its core. Moran moves carefully, plotting retaliation while understanding that any misstep could be fatal. The massacre achieves more than the elimination of key personnel. It delivers a psychological blow. Moran's men are haunted by the memory of friends executed in a space they once considered safe. Every alley, every garage, every familiar building becomes a potential trap. Survivors carry the weight of fear alongside the practical task of maintaining operations. The gang's diminished numbers make them vulnerable to Capone's aggression, and the balance of power shifts irreversibly. Capone's Chicago outfit, emboldened by success, expands its influence. The streets of the North Side, previously contested, begin to tilt toward his control. Bootlegging routes are seized. Speakeasies once loyal to Moran are coerced into paying tribute. Capone's men operate with confidence, knowing that the North Side Gang is weakened, fractured, and wary of provoking further attacks. The brutality of the massacre has a dual effect. It consolidates power for Capone while instilling fear that limits organized retaliation. Law enforcement reacts slowly, hampered by corruption, limited resources, and intimidation. Public outrage grows, but the intricacies of the gangland world make arrests difficult. Investigations falter, witnesses recant, and fear prevents many from speaking openly. For Moran, the Northside Gang, and Chicago itself, the massacre becomes a lesson in both strategy and impunity. Power can be seized decisively, and retaliation may be impossible if fear dominates action. Over the following months, the Northside Gang attempts to regroup. Moran seeks alliances, shoring up remaining allies while avoiding direct confrontation with Capone. Operations continue in a limited capacity, but each shipment, each skirmish, is shadowed by memories of February 14th. Internal tensions rise as men question leadership, strategies falter, and the cohesion that once defined the gang erodes. The human cost, death, trauma, and loss, cannot be reversed, and the gang's influence begins a steady decline. The city, too, feels the long-term effects. Businesses become cautious, wary of entanglement in gang disputes. Civilians navigate streets with increased vigilance, aware that the war for control of the North Side is violent, unpredictable, and lethal. Chicago's identity as a city of opportunity is now intertwined with fear, its skyline and streets haunted by the specter of organized crime. By 1930, the Northside Gang exists more in memory than in operational strength. Moran survives, but the aura of invincibility is gone. Smaller crews continue sporadic activity, but the once robust network of warehouses, speakeasies, and loyal men is fragmented. Capone's outfit dominates, using lessons learned from February 14th to maintain control. The North Side Gang's decline is both strategic and symbolic, a powerful organization reduced not only by bullets, but by the psychological impact of loss and terror. The human stories behind this decline are vivid. Men who once ran streets with authority now cower in safe houses. Families live in fear of reprisals. Survivors are haunted by images of comrades executed in cold blood, forcing them to reconcile loyalty with self-preservation. Chicago's underworld is not simply reorganized, it is transformed. Power becomes centralized, threats minimized, and the legacy of the North Side Gang is forever intertwined with violence and caution. Psychologically, the massacre and subsequent decline leave scars that ripple through the remaining members of the gang. Moran's leadership is questioned constantly. Paranoia infiltrates daily operations. Decisions are delayed, alliances weakened, and the gang's once calculated precision becomes reactive, defensive, and constrained. The North Side, a district once controlled with strategy and ingenuity, now exists under the shadow of Capone's dominance. Meanwhile, Capone faces his own pressures. National attention on Chicago's violence brings scrutiny from law enforcement and the public. Corruption shields him temporarily, but the massacre, while successful, sets a precedent that intensifies policing efforts and legislative interest in organized crime. The human and strategic cost of his victory will resonate for years, shaping both criminal enterprise and law enforcement response. By the mid-1930s, the North Side Gang is largely absorbed into smaller criminal outfits or dissolved entirely. Its members are scattered, some arrested, some killed, others integrated into Capone's empire. Moran survives in reduced capacity, always cautious, always calculating, a shadow of the force he once commanded. The streets of Chicago have been permanently altered. The violent lessons of February 14th remain as much psychological as tactical, and Capone's dominance ensures that the city's underworld will operate under new rules. The aftermath of the massacre is more than a historical footnote. It is a case study in power, fear, and the human cost of ambition. Strategy without compassion, ruthlessness without restraint, leads to short-term victory, but leaves long-term consequences. The North Side Gang, once a symbol of cleverness, loyalty, and ingenuity, becomes a cautionary tale. Its decline underscores the limits of leadership, the fragility of organizations built on violence, and the indelible impact of terror on human lives. Chicago, scarred and vigilant, moves forward. The North Side blood feud fades from headlines, but its memory is permanent. Survivors, historians, and the city itself remember the cost of ambition unchecked, the fragility of power, and the human toll of conflict. The North Side Gang's rise and fall become a lens through which the mechanics of organized crime, loyalty, and human psychology are forever studied. In the end, the North Side Gang's decline is complete, but instructive. Its story illustrates that even in a city built on opportunity and ambition, human life is fragile, power is transient, and violence leaves consequences that ripple far beyond the initial moment of action. The streets of Chicago, once alive with the North Side Gang's audacious energy, are quiet now, but the echoes of February 14th, 1929, and the lessons of the beer wars endure, etched in memory, in history, and in the blood that once stained the cobblestones. The North Side Gang story is etched into Chicago's history not only as a tale of violence, but as a lesson in ambition, strategy, and human cost. By the mid-1930s, the streets of the North Side have been reshaped, the once dominant gang reduced to fragments, and Al Capone's influence firmly established. Yet the echoes of the blood feud reverberate far beyond Chicago, informing law enforcement, popular culture, and the understanding of organized crime in America. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, in particular, becomes a symbol of both ingenuity and brutality. It demonstrates the ruthless calculus of organized crime. Preparation, deception, and precision can achieve what sheer force alone cannot. Capone's audacity, disguising killers as police officers, timing the attack perfectly, and striking the heart of the North Side Gang, leaves an indelible mark on criminal strategy. From this point forward, the idea of spectacular hits becomes a defining feature of organized crime lore. Yet the massacre also exposes limits. The public is horrified. National newspapers print photographs of the executed men, their faces frozen in disbelief and terror. The shock prompts political leaders and law enforcement agencies to act. While prosecutions are limited due to corruption and intimidation, the event accelerates federal interest in organized crime, laying the groundwork for later reforms, investigations, and the eventual dismantling of powerful crime syndicates. The massacre teaches that every act of violence, no matter how expertly executed, carries consequences beyond immediate tactical gain. The North Side Gang's rise and fall also underscore the human dimension of organized crime. Dean O'Banion, Jaime Weiss, Bugs Moran, their ambitions, loyalties, and rivalries reflect the personal stakes behind every decision. Lives are spent, lost, and forever altered in pursuit of power. The human cost is staggering: men executed in garages, families terrified into silence, communities living under the shadow of fear. The story is not only about gangsters, it is about human resilience, fear, and the fragility of life in a world ruled by violence. Culturally, the blood feud leaves a lasting imprint. The events of the North Side Gang inspire newspapers, books, and eventually films that dramatize Prohibition-era Chicago. The image of gangsters executing rivals in broad daylight, the use of police disguises, and the audacity of these attacks capture the imagination of the public. The North Side Gang becomes more than a historical footnote. They become archetypes of ambition, cunning, and tragedy, illustrating the dark allure of criminal enterprise. Strategically, the feud demonstrates the importance of planning, deception, and timing in organized crime. Moran's failure to anticipate Capone's willingness to strike with maximum violence highlights the thin margin for error in gang leadership. Capone's success conversely shows how psychological warfare, instilling fear, demonstrating power, can be as effective as the theft of territory or resources. Future gang leaders study these events, learning both the efficacy and the danger of high-profile attacks. Yet even as Capone consolidates power, the North Side Gang's story endures as a cautionary tale. The fragile alliances, the cycles of retaliation, and the human toll reveal the inherent instability of organizations built on violence. Moran survives, but he never regains the dominance that O'Banion once held. The remaining members of the gang are absorbed into other criminal networks or vanish entirely. The streets they once controlled are silent, yet the lessons remain alive. Loyalty, strategy, and foresight are critical, but they cannot eliminate the unpredictability of ambition and human desire. The legacy also extends to law enforcement and policy. Chicago's authorities, embarrassed by the massacre, increased surveillance, coordination, and legal pressure on gangs. Federal authorities, observing the escalation of violence, begin to develop organized crime divisions, tracking networks, and intelligence-gathering techniques that will later become standard practice. The blood feud thus serves as both an operational case study and a catalyst for institutional evolution. Moreover, the North Side Gang story illustrates contrasts that define the human experience in violence. Strategy versus instinct, loyalty versus betrayal, ambition versus mortality. Every decision carried immediate consequences. Every misstep could prove fatal, and every act of brilliance was shadowed by potential disaster. These contrasts give the narrative a timeless resonance, offering lessons not only in criminal strategy, but in leadership, risk management, and human psychology. The North Side Gang's rise and fall also mirror the broader transformation of Chicago during Prohibition. A city of opportunity and innovation, of commerce and culture, became a city marked by violence and fear. The gangs, in their battles, reshaped the urban landscape, influencing political alliances, law enforcement priorities, and public perception of crime. The streets tell stories of ambition, bloodshed, and resilience, histories that remain etched in both memory and architecture. Even today, historians, criminologists, and storytellers revisit the North Side blood feud. The narrative offers a rare window into the interplay between ambition, strategy, and human cost. It challenges the romanticized notion of gangsters as untouchable or glamorous, revealing instead a world governed by calculation, terror, and the fragile nature of life and power. Moran, Weiss, and O'Banion are remembered not just as criminals, but as players in a high-stakes game whose rules were written in blood. Ultimately, the North Side Gang's saga is both a warning and a lesson. It warns of the dangers of unchecked ambition and ruthless strategy, highlighting the psychological, social, and human toll of organized crime. Simultaneously, it teaches about leadership, loyalty, and the consequences of decisions in environments where stakes are extreme and mistakes are fatal. The streets of Chicago may have changed, the gang may have dissolved, but the echoes of the North Side blood feud endure, a permanent chapter in the city's and the nation's history. In the end, the North Side gang leaves an indelible mark. Their story is not just about crime, it is about power, fear, and the human consequences of ambition pursued without restraint. Chicago remembers them, not only in headlines and photographs, but in the lessons their rise and fall provide to every generation studying the interplay of strategy, violence, and human nature.
If you made it to the end, thank you. Please leave a like and subscribe. It helps me create more stories like this one, because some secrets are still waiting to be heard.